Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really big one, the intersection of artificial intelligence and sustainability.
Yeah, how they link up. It's fascinating and honestly pretty complex.
Definitely. We've gathered quite a range of perspectives looking at how AI helps track emissions, makes logistics greener.
And even things like how cities, like Chicago, for instance, are using AI to grapple with climate change impacts. We've got insights on bias, ethics, even the environmental cost of AI itself.
So our aim today is really to unpack this for you. We want to explore the potential, the real wins AI offers for sustainability.
But also shine a light on some of the, let's say, trickier questions and the ethical minefield that potentially comes with it.
Right, giving you a clear picture of the power, the promise, but also the risks involved as AI gets, well, everywhere.
Exactly. It's about understanding both sides of the coin without getting too bogged down, hopefully, highlighting the key things to think about.
Okay, so let's start with the upsides then. The ways AI is actually, helping us move towards sustainability. Carbon tracking seems like a really fundamental place to start.
It really is. And what's genuinely interesting here is how AI changes the game. We're moving beyond these sort of broad, maybe annual estimates of emissions.
Which were always a bit vague, weren't they?
Exactly. Vague estimates, averages. Now, AI allows for this incredibly granular, often real-time monitoring across supply chains that can be massively complex.
So instead of guessing, companies can actually see their impact in detail.
Pretty much. It offers a much clearer picture, which, theoretically opens the door for much more targeted, effective action to reduce that impact.
And are we seeing this actually used, like in the real world?
Yeah, definitely. Google Cloud, for example, they have their carbon footprint tool. It gives companies emissions data tied directly to how they use Google services.
Huh. That's quite specific. It makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If you have that level of detail, does it actually push companies to be more serious?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It certainly could. It introduces a new layer of potential accountability, maybe transparency.
Because the data's right there. Harder to ignore, maybe?
Potentially. When it's specific and available, vague sustainability claims get harder to maintain. But the key is how companies use that info. Is it just for reporting, ticking a box for, say, CSRD regulations?
Or is it driving real change, genuine reductions?
Precisely. That's the critical part. And ensuring the tools themselves aren't biased. But we'll probably get into that later.
Okay. Another big area seems to be green logistics. I mean, we all see delivery trucks everywhere. Sounds like AI is making a dent there.
Oh, absolutely. This is a really tangible one. Think about UPS. They've been using their Orion system for years now.
Right, I've heard of that. It optimizes routes.
Exactly. It uses AI to figure out the most efficient delivery paths. Less distance driven means less fuel burned, fewer emissions. Simple as that, but scaled up, it's huge.
And it's probably more than just the basic route, I imagine.
Oh, yeah. AI can handle dynamic routing, changing paths based on real-time traffic, weather. It helps with load balancing, making sure trucks aren't half empty.
Avoiding those empty miles.
Right. And even predictive maintenance for the vehicles themselves, fixing a potential issue before it causes a breakdown and, wasted journeys or delays.
And it's not just the trucks on the road, is it? What about inside the warehouses?
Good point. Warehouse automation is another piece. Companies like DHL, Amazon Robotics, they're using AI and robotics to optimize workflows, manage inventory, reduce energy use within those huge facilities.
So it's kind of end-to-end optimization, really.
That's the goal, making the whole logistics chain smoother, more efficient, and less resource-intensive.
Okay, moving along. Sustainable sourcing and epics tracking. This sounds complex. Trying to figure out where everything really comes from.
It is incredibly complex. Supply chains can be vast, opaque, but AI's strength here is its ability to process huge amounts of data to map these networks.
Mapping them out, how does that help with ethics or sustainability?
Well, by mapping the chain, AI can analyze data associated with different point suppliers, regions looking for red flags, environmental violations, potential human rights issues.
Is there examples of this?
Yeah, IBM Watson has been used in projects tracing conflict-free minerals, for example, trying to ensure they don't come from conflict zones. Similar things with cocoa supply chains, tracking traceability.
So it's about transparency, knowing the origin.
Exactly. And some systems even use predictive models. They try to identify high-risk suppliers before a problem blows up. This helps companies, try to meet regulations like the German Supply Chain Act.
So AI gives companies a clearer view, potentially, of their sourcing footprint, both environmentally and ethically.
That's the idea. Enhanced visibility is, well, it's seen as a vital first step towards genuinely responsible sourcing, though, again, it's not without its own challenges.
Right, we'll definitely circle back to those. But first, let's touch on AI in the broader fight against climate change itself, beyond supply chains and logistics.
Yes, and this is where AI's data analysis power really shines. Think about analyzing vast climate data sets to find patterns, generate insights.
Like what kind of insights?
Well, optimizing energy use in buildings is a good example. We saw a mention of a system called Adian, saving up to 40% energy in some cases.
40%? Wow.
How intelligently managing heating, cooling, lighting based on occupancy, weather forecasts, energy prices, really fine-tuning consumption.
Okay, that makes sense. What else?
All sorts of things, really. AI is used for mapping Antarctic icebergs to understand melting patterns, tracking deforestation, using satellite imagery.
Better weather prediction, too, I assume.
Definitely more accurate weather and climate modeling, and even suggesting more efficient waste management routes or sorting processes in cities.
And you mentioned Chicago earlier, using it locally.
That's right. There's work being done in Chicago using AI to better understand and predict urban flooding, the Urban Baseline Flooding Project. And researchers at the University of Chicago are using AI to refine climate model projections, make them more accurate at a regional level.
So it's really versatile, from global climate models down to, like, predicting floods on specific streets.
Exactly. It highlights how AI can be applied at different scales to tackle various facets of the climate challenge.
Okay, so summing up this part, we're seeing AI deployed for carbon tracking, making logistics greener, trying to improve sourcing visibility, and directly helping in climate science and adaptation. Some really promising applications.
Absolutely. It offers this powerful toolkit, doesn't it, for understanding these really complex systems, finding the hidden inefficiencies, and hopefully making more informed, data-driven decisions for sustainability.
But there's always a but, isn't there? We need to talk about the other side, the potential pitfalls, the ethical tangles, the environmental costs of AI.
Right, because it's definitely not all straightforwardly positive. These tools come with their own set of challenges and risks.
So let's go back through those areas. Carbon tracking AI sounds good, but what are the catches?
Well, first off, data privacy. You're collecting potentially sensitive operational data from across many suppliers, maybe even smaller businesses. Who owns that data? How is it secured? That's a big one.
Okay, privacy concerns. What else?
There's the risk of, well, greenwashing, as we hinted at. Companies might use these fancy tools to generate impressive reports.
Without actually making deep, meaningful cuts to their emissions, just focusing on what looks good.
Exactly, showing the data without the genuine intent behind it. And then there's bias. If the AI tool relies heavily on data from regions with good digital infrastructure,
It might underrepresent emissions from places with weaker data collection, like the Global South.
precisely, you could end up with a skewed picture, potentially overlooking significant impacts in certain areas because the data just isn't there or isn't captured well by the model.
And you mentioned the energy use of the AI tools themselves.
Yes, that's a crucial point we need to keep coming back to. Running these complex AI models, especially training them, takes a significant amount of computational power.
Which means energy and emissions from that process.
Right, so there's a bit of an irony, isn't there? Using an energy-intensive tool to track energy savings or emissions, we need to factor that into the net benefit.
Okay, that's a lot to think about just for carbon tracking. What about the ethical dilemmas in green logistics? Route optimization sounds efficient, but
But it raises questions about jobs, for one. As AI gets better at planning routes, managing warehouses, even driving trucks eventually, what happens to the human workers? Job displacement is a real concern.
automation anxiety.
Definitely. Then there's data ownership again. All that tracking data delivery routes, vehicle performance, driver behavior perhaps. Who controls it? The logistics company, the tech provider, the customer.
And how is it used? Beyond just efficiency.
Good question. There's also the issue of uneven adoption. Big companies like UPS or Amazon can invest heavily in these AI systems. What about smaller logistics firms?
Could they get left behind? Disadvantaged?
It's a possibility, yeah. Creating a sort of digital divide within the industry. And finally, there's a risk that the intense focus on fuel efficiency and emissions.
Might overshadow other ethical concerns.
Right, like fair labor conditions for drivers or the ethical sourcing of the goods being transported or materials used in the vehicles. Efficiency isn't the only measure of good logistics.
Makes sense. You can be very fuel efficient while still having other problems in the chain. Okay, what about the risks in AI-powered sourcing? We talked about transparency, but what are the dangers?
Well, similar to the carbon tracking bias issue, data blind spots are a huge problem if you're trying to assess risks in parts of the world with limited or unreliable data.
The AI might just not see the problems. Child labor, deforestation, water pollution.
Exactly. Especially in the global south, where data infrastructure can be weaker. The AI might give a clean bill of health simply because it lacks the data to flag a risk.
Leading to a false sense of security.
Precisely. And even with data, algorithmic bias can creep in. The way the AI is trained might lead it to overlook certain types of risks or prioritize others based on flawed assumptions baked into the model.
So you think you're covered, but you're not.
Potentially. And that ties into the risk of over-reliance. Companies might see the AI report and skip crucial on-the-ground verification, the, human checks that are still essential.
Trusting the tech too much.
Yeah. And the ultimate risk, perhaps, is that AI-powered ethical sourcing just becomes tokenism, a way to signal virtue without making fundamental changes to purchasing practices that might actually cost more.
Just another label, basically.
Could be, if not implemented with genuine commitment and rigorous oversight.
So across all these sustainability applications, AI isn't a magic bullet. It brings its own baggage.
Definitely not magic. It's a tool, and like any powerful tool, it can be misused or have unintended negative consequences if we're not careful.
This maybe leads us to some broader ethical risks with AI generally, beyond just these specific sustainability uses.
Absolutely. These issues crop up again and again. Bias and discrimination are probably the most talked about. AI systems learn from data, and if that data reflects existing societal biases...
The AI learns those biases too.
Exactly. We saw that with Amazon's experimental recruiter tool that was biased against women because it learned from historical hiring data. Predictive policing is another controversial area where bias is a huge concern.
Right. And then there's the black box problem.
Yeah, opacity. With complex AI models, especially deep learning, it can be incredibly difficult, sometimes impossible, to understand why the AI made a particular decision or prediction.
So you get an output, maybe a risk score for a supplier or a loan decision, but you don't know the reasoning behind it.
Right, which makes it hard to challenge errors, identify bias, or even trust the system. Accountability becomes really difficult.
And you also mentioned manipulative design earlier. How does that fit in?
Well, think about algorithms designed primarily to maximize user engagement. Social media is the classic example, right? TikTok, YouTube, Instagram Reels.
Designed to keep you watching, scrolling.
Exactly. They optimize for attention, often using techniques like infinite scroll, autoplay, personalized recommendations that can push users towards more extreme or problematic content just because it keeps them hooked.
And that can have real costs for well-being, mental health.
Absolutely. There are serious concerns about addiction, echo chambers, the spread of misinformation, all driven by algorithms optimizing for metrics that aren't necessarily aligned with user well-being. This isn't just social media either. These design principles could potentially influence sustainability tools too, maybe optimizing for engagement over actual impact.
That's a disturbing thought.
Yeah.
Which connects to this idea of AI's own environmental impact, the carbon cost of all this computation.
Yes, let's dig into that because it's significant. Training just one large language model, for instance, was estimated to emit something like over 284 tons of co-euro equivalent.
Just training one model, that's a lot.
Right.
More than several cars emit over their lifetimes, right?
Easily. And that's just training. Then you have the ongoing energy cost of running these models, making predictions, answering queries, plus the energy for the massive data centers themselves, the cooling systems needed to stop them overheating, manufacturing the specialized hardware like GPUs.
It all adds up to a pretty substantial environmental footprint.
It really does. And it creates this inherent tension, doesn't it? We're developing and deploying this incredibly energy-hungry technology, hoping it will help us solve climate change, which is fundamentally an energy and emissions problem.
Yeah, that's quite the paradox. And it sounds like we don't even have a clear picture of the total impact.
That's a major issue. There's a real lack of transparency and standardized reporting from tech companies about the carbon footprint of their AI operations. It's hard to manage what you don't measure.
Is anyone trying to fix that?
There's growing pressure for more transparency and discussions around things like carbon labeling for AI products or services. So you, as a user or a company, might know the estimated emissions associated with using a particular AI tool.
Like nutritional labels on food, but for carryout.
Sort of, yeah. But we're still in the very early stages of figuring out how to do that accurately and consistently.
Okay, so we have bias, opacity, manipulative design, and the sheer energy cost. And that manipulative design point connects to another concept I've seen mentioned, surveillance capitalism. What's that about?
Yes. That term was coined by Shoshana Zuboff. It essentially describes a new form of market capitalism where the raw material isn't physical goods, but human experience.
Human experience? How?
Our online behavior, clicks, searches, likes, location data, even facial expressions or tone of voice is captured, often without our full understanding or consent. This behavioral data is then analyzed by AI.
To predict our future behavior.
Exactly, to predict what we'll buy, what we'll click on, what political messages might resonate with us. These predictions are then sold to businesses, advertisers, political campaigns, basically anyone who wants to influence our behavior for their own profit or goals.
So our private lives become data points for sale.
That's the core idea. Private human experience is extracted, turned into behavioral data, and used to create prediction products traded in new kinds of markets. It's surveillance, but driven by economic imperatives.
Are there specific examples of this that tie into AI?
Well, Clearview AI is a really controversial one. They reportedly scraped billions of images from the internet, social media, news sites, everything without consent, to build a massive facial recognition database sold primarily to law enforcement.
Scraping billions of photos without asking. That sounds invasive.
Highly invasive, yes, and raises huge privacy and ethical questions. Even TikTok's algorithm, while optimizing for engagement, also functions within this logic. It collects vast amounts of user data to refine its predictions about what will keep you watching, potentially creating echo chambers or even promoting harmful content if that's what the data suggests works.
So the drive for prediction and profit can override other considerations, like privacy or well-being.
That's the central critique of surveillance capitalism.
This really forces us to question what responsible AI even means then, doesn't it? When you have these conflicting forces at play.
It absolutely does. Think about ChatGPT. Amazing tool, right? Democratizes access to information, helps people write, learn. But it can also generate convincing misinformation at scale, perpetuate biases from its training data, and has a significant carbon footprint itself. So is it responsible? It's complicated.
Or AI in marketing. It can spawn emerging green trends, help companies connect with environmentally conscious consumers.
Or it can be used for highly sophisticated greenwashing, manipulating consumers into thinking products are more sustainable than they really are, using personalized targeting based on surveillance data.
Right. It seems like the intent and the values baked into the AI are crucial.
Absolutely critical. It forces product teams, companies, policymakers, all of us really, to ask some tough questions. What values is this AI actually optimizing for? Efficiency, profit, engagement, or something else like genuine well-being or environmental health?
Who benefits from this AI? Who might be harmed?
Exactly. How do we even measure success? Is it just key performance indicators like clicks or conversions or tons of CO2 tracked? Or do we need broader metrics that capture ethical impact, fairness, long-term sustainability?
What about something like personalized pricing using AI? That seems like a minefield.
Oh, definitely. On one hand, AI could potentially analyze someone's ability to pay and offer lower prices for essential goods or services, increasing accessibility.
Yeah.
That sounds good, right?
Okay, potentially.
But on the other hand, it could easily lead to discrimination, charging different prices based on inferred characteristics like race, gender, location, or simply charging the maximum price someone seems willing to bear based on their data profile.
Exploiting perceived willingness to pay.
Precisely. It opens up huge potential for unfairness and reinforces existing inequalities. Where do you draw the line? It's incredibly difficult.
Wow. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah.
From the real potential of AI to help with sustainability challenges to this whole other side of ethical risks, biases, environmental costs, and even manipulation.
It's definitely a dual-edged sword, isn't it? The same technologies that can help us track emissions or optimize resource use
Can also perpetuate bias, invade privacy, maybe mislead us, and consume vast amounts of energy in the process.
Right. Navigating this requires being really conscious about the data we use, the design choices we make, the incentives we create, and the broader societal impact. It's not just a tech problem, it's deeply human.
So if you had to boil it down, what are the key takeaways you think people should hold on to from this deep dive?
I think, number one, AI does offer genuinely powerful tools for advancing sustainability. That potential is real and shouldn't be dismissed. We saw examples in tracking, logistics, climate science.
But number two.
Number two, these tools come with significant ethical and environmental strings attached. Bias, privacy, energy consumption, the potential for misuse or unintended harm. These are not edge cases. They are central challenges we have to address.
So it's about harnessing the power responsibly.
Exactly. It requires critical thinking, transparency, and a constant focus on the why behind the what. Why are we deploying this AI? Who truly benefits? What are the potential downsides, and how do we mitigate them?
It's not enough for it to be clever. It has to be wise, in a way.
That's a good way to put it. Wise deployment, considering the whole picture, not just the narrow technical or efficiency gains.
Okay, so to leave our listeners with something to chew on, here's a final thought. Given AI's capacity to both help and harm, particularly in the sustainability and ethics context,
How do we actually ensure its development and use are guided more by, say, a strong moral compass and a long-term vision for a healthy planet and a fair society?
rather than just being driven by the immediate goals of efficiency or profit, what guardrails do we need?
And maybe what role do we all play as individuals, consumers, citizens in demanding more transparency and accountability from the companies and governments creating and using these incredibly powerful technologies?
Lots to think about there. Thanks for diving deep with us today.